you tell us a little bit about your background and experience?
Absolutely, Shay. I am a Marcella Oakley, and I have previous experience working in law enforcement and real estate, actually throughout the DMV area here in Northern Virginia. I was a member of a hostage negotiation team in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm honored to say that I worked under Derek Gaunt. I was also an SVU detective tasked with investigating crimes against children. And in my real estate career, I actually have extensive experience in navigating the challenges of being both a buyer and a seller. As a result, my team is one of the top teams in the Northern Virginia DMV area. I'm excited to bring my love of both real estate and negotiations to the Black Swan Group. I'm also very excited to be a part of this.
I'm gonna jump in for just a second here too, because Derek has been part of the Black Swan Group for quite a while. He's really been collaborating with us from the beginning, even before we incorporated and formally formed the company. He and I have been friends for a long time. And Derek was after me for the longest time to bring you onto the team, Marcella. And he just kept bringing up your name and kept talking about how solid you were and how good you were as a negotiator, and the fact that you've been out there navigating the real estate environment and putting the hostage negotiation skills, what is now the Black Swan method, to use successfully. And I think it's awesome that you're on the team now. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Well, Chris, that is a huge compliment coming from you. This is the A game, and to be anywhere near the A game is just it's a game changer in my life. So honored to be here. Thank you.
Yes. And Derek, for the people who are just now tuning into our Black Swan Group fireside conversations, could you give us a little bit of detail about your background and experience?
All right. So for those of you who missed yesterday, or no, I'm sorry, for those of you who were here yesterday and you've heard this already, now's the time for you to take a 30-second nap. Those who are just joining us today, I'm an instructor and coach for the Black Swan Group. I've been with the group now since, on an official basis, since 2010. I've known Chris since probably 2000, 2001. I think that's when he transferred from New York to DC, and I was kind of prolific in the world of hostage negotiation, especially when it came to training matters in the DC area. And so a mutual friend introduced us, and the two of us have not looked back since. I cut my teeth like the rest of these guys in law enforcement. I became a negotiator. I became a cop in '88, a negotiator in '97, team leader in 2001, team commander in 2004. And that is a position I held up until the time I officially punched out back in 2017. And it's been one hell of a ride. I've met some really cool people, done some really cool things, and stayed immersed in the value of interpersonal communication skills to help you increase your productivity, your proficiency, and overall your happiness. And there aren't too many places on the planet where you're allowed to do something like that, and the Black Swan Group is one of them. So to echo what Marcella said, when you're associated with the A game, there's nothing better. So I am happy to be here as well.
Absolutely. And if you guys could just give a clapping emoji for them, we're going to we're going to jump into our topic of the day. So, question for you, Marcella. How has proof of life changed the way agents work in real estate?
That's a great question, Jay. Proof of life is has just shifted the way that so many agents do real estate. We, as a profession, have done things the same way for decades, and we're seeing some changes in technology, but we will put in so much work before we know whether or not we're going to be actually working with that client. And before I get into how it's changed real estate specifically, I just want to explain proof of life. Essentially, proof of life is a calibrated question. We don't like to ask direct questions in the Black Swan Group, and we definitely don't stay away from the why question. However, there's a very specific scenario where why is absolutely applicable, and that is in the proof of life question. In that scenario, we're finding out, we're learning whether there is a deal at all and whether that deal is with you. We can do that before we even get to the table. And to take it further, if the deal is with you, is that the right deal for you? So in proof of life, we do ask why. We say, with tactical empathy, of course, everything we do needs to be attached. We need to preemptively apply tactical empathy because proof of life is an assertive move. We're asking someone essentially why they're choosing to work with us. So in being very aware of your tone, applying tactical empathy beforehand, you want to ask the prospective client, there are so many agents in this industry, particularly in the DMV area. Why is it that you're choosing to work with our team? And that's very different than, well, why do you want to work with us? That message just in tone alone is the delivery it needs to be in that analysis, in the analytical, the late night DJ FM voice, essentially, that Chris Voss does so well, Derek Gaunt does so well. And then you listen. It's very important to use a skill called dynamic silence after throwing out proof of life, because we tend to want to, it's an uncomfortable question to ask, and we tend to want to add to it to provide value, because that's what a lot of agents do. We're trained to go in, provide value, get the deal done. But using that dynamic silence, you're going to get a ton of information back, and they're either going to say to you, well, Marcella, or Derek, or Chris, you guys are, we were referred to you by a friend of ours, and they really liked the way that you walked them through the process. You explained everything, and they didn't feel like they were being pushed into a corner to make decisions. Well, we then go into another skill set, which is the quick 2+1, to get even more information from that, to learn more whether you're the person for them. But that's a pretty good indicator. If they're giving you your value proposition, it's a good indicator that you're probably going to be a good fit for them. Now, on the other hand, in an industry where 50,000 new agents are jumping in nationally because the market is hot as a real estate agent, there are people, and we have to remind ourselves of this, we have to slow down. There are people who will work with a brand new agent because they just need a vessel to get the deal done. They don't necessarily want a professional. And so if they're turning to you and saying, well, I don't know. I mean, isn't that why you're here? Aren't you supposed to tell me why I'm supposed to choose you? Then there should be some red flags that come up. Still apply tactical empathy because these skills are compounding. So we still need to stay curious. But getting that information ahead of doing all the work that you would in a listing agreement, to provide a listing agreement, to walk through the home, to do your research ahead of time. Getting that proof of life out ahead of the game is going to save you time, and more importantly, help guide you to the type of clients that you want to work with. Chris actually discussed this 2 days ago on Wednesday on the Fireside Chat, which I thought was, this is a game changer in real estate. So many of us as agents can look back at a client and say, oh, that transaction sucked the life out of me. Yes, it was lucrative, but I don't ever want to do that again. It was so stressful. And we're really not providing our best service when we're dealing with someone who doesn't work well with us. So Chris brought up something that was a concept borrowed from the Genius Network called the ELF and the halves. And Chris, would you be opposed to me just bringing you up real quick to explain the ELFs and the halves? Because I think that's just so important in real estate.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. You want me to go ahead and launch into it right now?
Absolutely, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. And it dovetails very nicely into the proof of life idea. Is there a deal? Is a deal for you? And actually, do you want to deal with them? ELF is, and this is inspired by Joe Polish, Genius Network. ELF is a client that's easy, lucrative, and fun. And half is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. And the L in half could also be lucrative, hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating. And like Marcella just said, it could be lucrative and it might suck the life out of you. You may look back on that and go, I am never doing that again. So this proof of life diagnosis that we go into, and I love the way Marcella talked about it, that the skills are compounding and you need to keep using the skills. The agents that are picking this up are literally working 20% as much and making the same amount of money. Now imagine a pay raise that gives you. And, we'd be remiss if we didn't throw at you guys the additional resources we have, especially the free ones, to help get you better. And on our YouTube channel, we've got a couple of interviews with agents that have initiated proof of life and the half concept. And they are happy. They're enjoying a real estate business again. They're not constantly on edge. They're not answering their phone at night and on weekends. They're not constantly living in fear because they're chasing business, this constant feeling of anxiety. And I know this sounds crazy to you. I mean, it sounds too good to be true. Don't take our word for it. Learn the stuff. Start learning this a little at a time. Derek is going to tell you, just get 1 degree better every day. But this concept of proof of life and elf versus half is liberating, and it's just it makes life a lot more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly in an industry where we really rely on, a lot of us rely on our referral-based network, our referral-based business. So, I mean, long term, the return on investment to just that 2 millimeter shift you're going to work with more elves and they're going to refer you because the halves don't refer you and they take a lot of your time.
Hey,
And you're right.
Marcella, I'd like to jump in with one more thing that you made me think of as well, too, if I
Absolutely.
may.
Absolutely.
And another guy we're collaborating with in the industry is Steve Shull, and Steve Shull and I are working on a book on real estate. And one of the writers we worked with, here's an example of why the traditional stuff that agents do that everybody thinks is paying dues is wrong. Because we started laying out this proof of life concept to this writer, and she said, it's interesting. In the last 8 years, I have been on a real estate agent's mailing list and has gotten the monthly and weekly emails from this agent. I have also engaged in 3 real estate transactions in the last 8 years, and I never once used this agent. And that agent who's got her on the email list and constantly sending out those emails is not using proof of life. And that agent is being played for the fool. And no, people don't do this intentionally. But this woman engaged in 3 transactions, didn't once use the agent who had her on the list. And this plays to exactly what Marcella's talking about, your referral base. Traditional real estate agent practices, standard, quote, best practices, which is makes you common with everyone else. Best practices are common practices. Your referral rates are low. Also, the agents that have use proof of life and half an elf, their referral rates are through the.
That's amazing. It's just that shift. And I think that really reflects on why these skills, the Black Swan Group skill set. And you brought up a great point. You don't want to take on too much. I mean, we have the negotiation 9, which is our foundational skill set. Those alone will just change the game for you. Um, but it sounds like the woman that was receiving the emails didn't trust the agent that was sending them. So, and this is we are selling trust in this business. We're not selling houses. People trust us. This is one of the most stressful uh, times in someone's life. We tend to forget that as agents. Selling and buying a house from the perspective of the client is a very stressful time. There are lots of unknowns, and it typically happens in a very short time span. So in the market that I'm in, it's typically 30 days. And if I look at a transaction, I can pick out all of the different moments that they don't know what's going to happen next. We as agents need to address that.
Absolutely. And speaking of the negotiation 9, how are asking labels more effective than direct questions in real estate?
That's a great question. So an asking label in the Black Swan Group, an asking label is essentially picking out the emotion, the dynamic, and verbalizing it. It's using your intuition. And in real estate, and this kind of connects to the unfortunate problem that we have in this industry of getting to yes, where everybody wants yes. So we all just strive for yes. If we do that 2 millimeter shift and we instead look for the dynamic and identify it and articulate it and ask, we'll get so much more information back. So if I ask my client, or the other agent on the other side, is a 30-day close okay for you? That's quick. I'm triaging. I just need to know. I need to get to the yes. Is this going to make the deal? Yes or no? Instead, if I say it seems like your client would prefer a quick close, I'm engaging them in a way that, and I need to be aware of my tone there. It seems like your client would like a quick close. I'm engaging them in a way that implies I need more information. And so we tell our clients here at the Black Swan Group to start small. So for all the agents listening on this call, this is scary. This is uncomfortable. Start at Starbucks. Don't start with that deal that you want. Start with the barista. It sounds like you're having a rough day today, and just listen. And then when he or she tells you how they're feeling, label what they tell you and just see what kind of information you get back. You're going to be astounded by the information that you get. Then start using it at your open houses. Start small, and then they work.
And here's what I wanted to throw in on top of that with the asking label. The power, excuse me, the power in the asking label is that it doesn't provoke the same defensive responses that a direct question does. There's a full third of the population that hates direct questions. You want to shut them down, you start peppering them with questions, and you're going to be well on your way to having them close off to you. They feel like they're being interrogated. They feel like they're being pumped for information. So it's not a heavy lift for you to take whatever, what, when, why, where, how question, turn it on its ear and make it a label. Instead of asking your counterpart agent, why haven't they signed the contract yet? The shift would be, it seems like there's a pretty good reason as to why they haven't signed yet. It carries an entirely different tone because, going back to what she said earlier, this is one of the most emotional transactions that take place in anyone's life. It's replete with negative emotions. Negative emotions impede people's cognitive ability. The more you allow those negative emotions and dynamics to persist, the dumber you're allowing your counterpart to remain. And all of us, regardless of what the conversation is about, we want the person on the other side to be as cognitively nimble as possible. So we're working overtime to mitigate those negatives. And part of that process is let's change those direct questions into asking labels. And you'll be amazed at how much more information you get when you ask a question in a label form. And it's not, all you have to do is think of the label. It looks like, it seems like, it sounds like, and then upward inflect at the end. That turns it into a question, and you're going to get a more candid and robust response from the other side. Sorry, Marcella.
Derek, no, I think you brought up a fantastic point. In Unfortunately, in our industry, there are agents that are under a significant amount of pressure and are trained to be assertive. That's how you make deals. You got to get in there. You got to, best and final, best and final. I'm not going to answer the phone, whatever it might be. Just get it done. If we address the underlying dynamic, we are invoking reciprocity. It is catching them off guard. They're being dealt with differently than they've ever expected or they're used to. You're going to get responses, and it might be guarded at first, but if you continue to use these skills, we have a 93% success rate in hostage negotiations in life or death scenarios for a reason. This transition into the private sector is showing similar success rates because they work, because it's based in human nature. And so, the power of reciprocity goes a long way, and just showing some tactical empathy it's amazing.
And Marcella, I know that you mentioned the late night FM DJ voice. Can you go a little bit in depth as to why it's critical for real estate negotiators to set the tone and use the late night FM DJ voice?
Absolutely. So we can impact someone's emotions just by using our tone of voice. And when you lower your diaphragm, slow your cadence, you're bringing your audience into listen to what you're saying, and it calms them down. So if we're talking like this, look, you just need to get this done. Can you just sign here? We have 5 minutes. You're stressing them out. And fear is the number one. It's a negotiation. And Derek, you might correct me on this. I might say this wrong, but fear is the number one driving factor in human decision making. You're applying fear to your clients, but if you slow them down and give them time to think and give them the information necessary, you're going to relax them, and you're going to allow them to reduce the emotions in their head and think clearly so they can make decisions. Now, as a woman, I would be careful though, because we don't want to sound whispery. And so we also don't want to sound like we're sending the wrong message. We are guiding and we are helping, and we're putting them in a frame of mind to help themselves and to empower them during a difficult transaction.
And I want you guys to go back and listen to this recording when we're done, and pay attention to how Marcella responded to Shay's question. You want to know what the late night FM DJ voice sounds like. You want to know what it sounds like specifically coming from a woman. Her response to Shay's question was all in the late night FM DJ voice. So it may have gotten by most of you, but when you go back and listen to the recording, listen to Shay's question and then listen to how Marcella responded if you want to know how that voice is supposed to hit the ear. Sorry, Marcella.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Thank you. And Lori Grenier, actually from Shark Tank, is phenomenal at this. So if you're watching TV at night and you happen to hear Lori Grenier, take some time and really listen to her, because she does a phenomenal job at it. But thank you, Derek.
That was a great example, Marcella. And I just want to remind everybody that is tuning in, if you have any questions for Marcella or Derek, just drop them in the chat and we'll invite you on stage to ask. So going back into the negotiation 9, how can real estate agents utilize accusation audits to get ahead of any negative sentiments their client might have?
Okay, wonderful question. So an accusations audit is it's a preemptive label, essentially. Um, it's an uncomfortable thing to do. It's gonna sound crazy. Um, it's gonna sound like I want you to shoot your clients and keep walking because that deal's not gonna happen. But an accusations audit is actually calling out the elephant in the room. Any thought that they may be having about you or the dynamic or the future, write them down ahead of time, practice it, and say it. We want to use accusations audits in the beginning. So it seems like, or I'm going to sound, you're probably thinking, and I might ask Derek to come in because you do a great job with explaining accusations audit. But in real estate, we're in an industry where people know that we're driving for yes, that a lot of agents are driving for yes, and they're afraid of that. They know that there are agents out there that are going to give them bad advice to get the listing contract signed. They know that they're working with agents that will do things that don't necessarily protect their best interest, and they're afraid of that. And so you need to say that. I'm going to sound like I want you to put a ton of money into your house before you even sell it. I'm going to seem like any agent out there that wants top dollar to do something that takes 30 days to do. Address those negative emotions, because if you don't, they're going to come up later. And in doing that, you're actually, if you throw out an accusations audit and listen, you're going to get way more information about what they're really concerned about that even sometimes is outside of the scope of the accusations audit that you gave. There's a wonderful agent out in California, and Chris did an interview with her. Y'all should listen to it. It's phenomenal. Regina Vanicola. And she does a phenomenal accusations audit before even going into a listing agreement. And it's changed the way that she does business. She's not sure. Listen to the interview. She does a phenomenal job of explaining how it's done in real life. Chris, I don't know if you wanted to
Yeah,
touch on that.
yeah, sure. Thanks, Marcella. It's Regina Vanicola, and the title of the interview on the YouTube on a YouTube channel is "Are You the Favorite or the Fool?" Steve Schull and I interviewed her, and this accusations audit is just so liberating for agents. And even the phrase "I've got bad news," that in and of itself, the agents that are using it are contending that is worth $1 million, because it gives you the ability to deliver bad news to your clients and gives them the chance to brace for it. And whatever they imagine in that 3 heartbeat wait between "I've got bad news" and you delivering the news, they're going to imagine something worse. And what you have to share as an agent is going to be a relief. It's crazy. It works every time. And that's just a tiny dose of the accusations audit. It's a spell from Hogwarts that changes everything in a moment. It's crazy.
It's so true. And we can we go through these transactions over and over again. We can think about these accusations audits ahead of time before even getting to know the client. I mean, how many of us are in a market where we have clients that are losing deals to people paying 75,000 over list all cash? We can do an accusations audit, so take the time to write down some audits ahead of time, whether it be for a listing appointment, dealing with a new client, a buyer that's working in a market that's stressful to get a home in. or a seller that is afraid of making the wrong decision. Just write down those audits and remember to use your tone. The tone is so important in the delivery of any of these messages.
And what you're doing is it's important to remember that the purpose of the accusations audit is to get out in front of those negatives. At the beginning of the conversation, this is the first conversation that you're having with a client, prospective client, whatever, however you want to phrase it. You're getting out in front of the negatives that you know are associated with almost every single transaction. You guys have been doing this long enough. You've heard the objections. You've seen where deals have fallen apart and the reasons why. That your accusations audit list is going to be a living and breathing document. It's going to constantly change because you're going to be constantly getting smarter. The ability to come up with an accusations audit, and that's just a list of the negative opinions, assumptions, or impressions that the other side has about you, who you represent, and the circumstance. You'll be able to figure it out. Generating your list is not going to be a problem for you. Where you're going to struggle is actually saying them. You're going to be scared to death. You're scared to death of running business off. You're scared to death that if they're not thinking that, I am going to plant that in their head and I'm going to lose the deal. Therefore, I ain't saying it. Well, I will tell you, to reinforce what Marcella just said, because you haven't said it doesn't mean it's gone anywhere. It doesn't mean it's not still there. And so that's what clients in your industry are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
How do I separate myself from the commonplace? As Chris said, best practices become common practices. And now 50,000 new agents entered the business last year. All 50,000 of them look exactly the same. So as a client, how do I differentiate between who I want to work with? Well, for the client, the easiest way to do that is cut your commission. That'll help me decide.
Mm-hmm.
When the reality is, because of the negatives that are associated with this transaction, they want somebody who's transparent. They want somebody who is forthright. They want somebody who is a straight shooter. What better way to indicate to your prospective client that you're a straight shooter by telling them, this is probably all this negative stuff that you're thinking about me and this transaction. You're taking that negative light and pointing it back at yourself. How courageous is that? How selfless is that? How far is that going to separate you from the rest of the pack? Because I guarantee you, if you're working with a team of agents and you're the only one using accusations audits, you look entirely different than the rest of the members on your team. And people, we talk about the fear associated with this type of transaction. That fear is born out of uncertainty. And the more certainty you can inject into your interactions with your clients and potential clients and other agents, the less fearful they become. And it's encouraging reciprocity. And that reciprocity is you turning the tables on them and having tactical empathy forced back in your direction when you get to your objective, when you get to your ask, when you get to your case in chief.
Absolutely. And, you know, to add on to that, Derek, these are difficult conversations and this isn't comfortable to do. I like to liken applying these skills to difficult conversations to cleaning a wound, right? It's not pretty. You're going to get sometimes a response that's uncomfortable for you, but you're getting information. You're allowing them to tell you their innermost thoughts and fears. And so if you get through that, it's like cleaning a wound. It eventually clears out and you get to form a relationship with them that's based and influence them through trust, which is really the baseline to where these skills come from. You're guiding through trust-based influence.
Nicely put, Marcella and Derek. We have a question from Jagar. Jagar, could you unmute your microphone and we'll answer?
Thank you so much, Shay, Marcella, Derek, Chris. This whole week has been fantastic. these fireside chats have just been invaluable. So I just want to start by thanking you and for having me up on the stage. So my question is to sort of flip it to the other side of real estate. Once the deal is done, you own a property. I own a rental property, and so I'm dealing with tenants. And one of the most challenging things about that is finding the right tenant. And, a lot of the stuff out there is about, the credit score and, do they have a good job and what have you. And I think most landlords know that just as important, if not more important, is this someone you can work with? And so I've been in situations where everything looked great on paper and they ended up being a nightmare. And my first time ever applying Chris's techniques was having to evict a tenant. And what I was really trying to do is get the tenant to evict themselves. And I'll keep it short, but it worked using your tactics. So my question is, how would you use proof of life when screening tenants? Because it really comes down to, the people, right? And you want to get a good sense of who you're going to be dealing with in potentially stressful situations in the future.
That's a phenomenal question. And it sounds like you're really afraid of being burned with any other person that you put in your home.
Well, for sure. I mean, it was my first time. I would say it was my first time I got burned, and I've been very fortunate since then. I haven't, but being a landlord, you're always going to have some issues come up. But tactical empathy has been a huge, huge tool for me that helps me deal with a lot of that. But when you have a proper fill, especially during this past year and a half, when everyone's under a lot of stress, finding the right people is critical. So yeah, I would definitely agree with your assessment there.
Well, I love that you're already thinking of the skill set to address your concerns. Because the proof of life scenario, the why question in proof of life is an assertive move, I would suggest starting with another skill set that we have, and it's the quick 2+1, which is using labels, mirrors, and dynamic silence to gauge and get more information from the prospective tenants so that you can really get a feel for the type of people that they are and what they're whether they would be a good fit for your home. But Derek, you might have another opinion, and you do have a lot more experience than I do.
No, you're in the ballpark. The proof of life is specific to whether they want to do business at all and whether that business is with you. Are you the fool or the favorite? If they've filled out a rental application and now you're in a process of vetting them through some sort of interview, they've made a commitment that they want to lease your property. So the proof of life is not going to be as applicable when dealing with a rental tenant. So to Marcella's point, quick 2+1 or calibrated questions. For example, historically, I've seen in the past where people have had personal issues that have led them to struggle in paying their rent. How have you managed your personal life in order to make sure that you've paid on time? Something to that effect. How question is a thought-shaping question. It'll give you some insight as to how they've performed as a renter in the past. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So we're going to dig into, in a deferential way, their past to determine that whether or not they're the right choice. What would you do if you found yourself in a position where you were going to be late on the payment? How have you handled that type of thing in the past is where I would go to try to vet the people even further. So to your question, I don't think that the proof of life is as appropriate in that instance because they've already made a commitment to you by putting pen to paper.
Yeah, and it's a great thing about asking a Black Swan team the same question because three different instructors are going to give you complementary answers, but each have a little bit different take on it. So proof of life per se is not here. However, proof of life, the question itself will play into you developing your profile of the half and elf tenant. What tenant's going to be hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, and what tenant's going to be easy, lucrative, and fun. So proof of life will trigger out why they want your apartment. And what you want to do is just listen carefully and do exactly as Marcella and Derek have advised. Apply the quick 2+1 to their responses. And you're now developing your profile for the halves and the elves. Everybody listening to us, whoever your clients are, you're capable of developing the profile of the halves and the elves based on the application of these skills, and let that continually make you smarter moving forward. Be willing to be smarter today than you were yesterday. Now, if this is only your first tenant, then that's cool. Keep track of what your gut is reacting to. One of the things that Derek talked about yesterday is this supercomputer that is our gut instinct and the massive amount of information that it's capable of processing and kicking out these answers that seem like intuition when in fact it's actually reasoned on a lot of data. So you're not really using the proof of life why question, why do you want to rent my apartment, to find out whether or not they're playing you for the fool, but it will help you develop your profile of tenants that you want.
That's a great response.
So, Marcella, you mentioned earlier something about yes addiction, and I wanted you to go into that a little bit deeper before we let these folks go because I see it as a common problem within your industry. Well, it's not just within your industry; it's a common human problem, but it seems to have taken on a life of its own in real estate. So, talk in our remaining time about yes addiction, and I'm sure that's going to generate some questions that'll take us to the top of the hour.
Okay, that's a great topic. We just naturally there are 5 different levels of listening, and in real estate, we tend to listen in that second level of rebuttal. We're waiting. We're so driven by getting to yes that we don't see the pitfalls that might be really behind us and actually getting to yes, or whether we even want to be in the deal at all. And so what the Black Swan Group has done, which I think is amazing, is because in real estate we ask, so I mean, just from get-go, if you're making phone calls, hey, is this a good time to talk? So many of us, we've been trained to do that. If you just do that little shift and take all of those questions that you're naturally going to ask in your industry and write them down in a no-oriented question. So the yes is essentially a no. So it's no to them, but that means yes to you. Is now a terrible time to talk. It changes when people are guarded against a question that makes them say yes. Their natural reaction is to protect themselves. So if we take that instinct away and allow them to keep their autonomy, they'll feel more comfortable giving a yes to you, which actually means no to the question. So they'll think, is it a terrible time to, it's not a terrible time to talk. Yeah, I'll talk to you, or if it is a terrible time to talk, they'll tell you a better time to talk. Whereas their natural reaction to is now good, can you talk now? Would be, what does Marcella want to talk to me about? And if I have 5 minutes, do I really want to talk about, I might want to sell my house, but do I really want to talk about that right now? Let me just say no, because that's a safer place. So if we just change it to that no-oriented question, then we will be more productive in the way that we engage with our clients or other agents on a day-to-day basis. And we can write those, we can have a go-to list because we do so many of the same tasks over and over again.
And so, to expound, yes is always commitment. It's obligation. People don't like feeling obligated to something they haven't volunteered for. If you are pressing them for a yes, you are taking away that volition. You're taking that from them. You have encroached on their autonomy. This goes back to that crap that's out there about yes momentum and yesable propositions, and there are some circles that even refer to it as yes tie downs. Now, take a minute and reflect on what I just said. Yes, tie downs. There are people that are supporting yes tie downs as a part of a good sales strategy. But the problem with it is right in your face. It's a tie down. Does that sound voluntary at all? You're using yes to tie someone down and you think they like that? Or the flip side of that, someone is using yes against you, trying to tie you down, and you're not resentful of that? Of course you are. And so when she talks about no-oriented questions, she's talking about taking any question that is yes-oriented, usually a verb-led question, and turn it into a question where they have to say no. We're completely and utterly amazed weekly at what people will agree to if you allow them to say no, that they know they wouldn't agree to if you allowed them to say yes. One of the great examples, if not the greatest example of all time, it's got to be close, is the guy that Chris used to work with back in Georgetown at the MBA school in Georgetown. He was also a fundraiser. I'm going to botch the story a little bit, but the crux of the story is he was a guy that was dialing for dollars at night for the Republican Party at a previous election. And he was using what everybody uses on cold calls, yes-oriented questions. And he took that script after learning about no-oriented questions, and he took those 3 questions that he asked prospective donors, and he turned all those yes-oriented questions into no-oriented questions, and he ran those 2 scripts side by side. What he saw was a 23% increase in conversion rates simply by changing the yes-oriented question to a no-oriented question. As agents, what would a 23% increase in your conversion rate do for you in 2021? That's the power of no-oriented questions. You keep hammering these people with a yes-oriented question, you're going to build resentment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Derek, this isn't easy. This is scary as an agent. If I'm an agent and you're at the table and you think you can get that deal done, we fall back on how we train. And if we decide to train better, we will make more deals. Discomfort leads to compromising your position or principles within the conversation to avoiding the conversation completely, which could lead to loss of commission, loss of trust, and lack of ability to guide. So if we invest in ourselves and plan for the discomfort, we will be better agents and we will be a more professional, we will interact with our colleagues on a more professional level.
Yeah, for sure. And this goes back to the fear thing. The fear thing is not just your clients.
Yeah.
The fear thing is not just the other agents. The fear thing is you. Why won't a percentage of you go out here after this call and attempt anything that we talked about? Because you're going to be afraid. You're going to be afraid that if I say that, I'm going to lose the business. The only way around that is to step out on faith. That's what Regina Vanicola did. She stepped out on faith. She recalls a story where she goes to a commercial site to deal with a seller, and she starts right off of the bat by saying, I got 10 reasons why you're not going to want to work with me. And she just let that sit. How many of you would have the courage to open up dialogue with a prospective lister by saying, I've got 10 reasons why you're not going to want to work with me? And she let it sit in silence and self-deprecating humor. She goes, I'm just kidding. There's only like 4. And then she laid them out, one after the other. And the last one that she laid out is, I'm a full service, full commission agent. I get 3.5, other side gets 2.5. And she says in the interview, I knew I was going to get the listing when he responded by saying, why don't you just split it down the middle 50-50 and give the buy side 3 and you keep 3? She said, in that moment, I knew I had him. Why did she have him? Because he's looking at her saying, she's different. There's no other agent that I can think of anywhere on the planet that would come out and say, here's why you don't want to work with me. How courageous is that? And so you're going to have to use whatever mechanisms that you can think of to overcoming your fear of losing the deal. What I hate for you to do is to provide value before a formal relationship has been established with your prospective client, and then make yourself less valuable and ultimately not get the deal. Not getting the deal is not the sin. Taking a long time to not get the deal, that's where the sin lies. Chris, did you want to add anything?
Only an amen.
That was
And
great. So, go ahead,
no,
Marcella.
oh, thanks, Shay. I just wanted to add that the power of your mindset is, that we can't overlook that a lot of this starts with you. And so taking the time to ensure that you're in the right mindset, to ensure that you're curious, will help you apply these skills, whether it be at a listing appointment or dealing with a buyer who's just stressful to deal with.
Absolutely. And one last question for both Marcella and Derek. What happens when you come across 2 realtors who are both Black Swan trained?
Well, I would love to answer that question if you wouldn't be opposed to me doing that. I love when I work with another Black Swan trained, whether it be an agent or, I mean, I've negotiated with, I think Brandon Voss is a phenomenal negotiator. And when you're dealing with well, I mean, everybody on the team obviously is a phenomenal negotiator, but when you're dealing with a Black Swan trained negotiator, you know that they're coming from, and these tools can be used to manipulate. So if you're using the tools for good reasons, then you're working with someone who will get the deal done and it will be done smoothly. It's in the industry, we all know that there are certain agents that we enjoy working with. And typically we enjoy working with them because they're professional. And it's no different with the skill set. If 2 people are trained in the Black Swan skill set, they are both curious. They are both working with the best interest of their clients in mind, but with the mindset that we're going to get to the end game. We're going to get to past that finish line together without being manipulative. And we're going to use these skills to be better listeners and to understand what might be in our way. So I love working with another Black Swan trained negotiator.
The skills can be used for good or evil. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
The way we teach it and our core values dictate that we don't teach this stuff to have people use it to manipulate other people. So having said that, if you've got another Black Swan trained negotiator and they took to heart what we were saying as a result of our training, you should feel excited because you're going to get to an agreement faster and you don't have to keep looking over your shoulder to see. What's the difference between manipulation and influence? It's the intent of the speaker. So ask yourself, what's your intent? Ask yourself, what's their intent? Now, going back to what Chris and I talked about earlier, your intuition is going to tell you right off the bat what that intent is. At one of our last live events, a guy walks into the room and he wants a seat in the room and he didn't prepay like everybody else prepaid. And it wasn't long into that conversation where it was clear he was using our stuff to try to work himself into a free seat. Not only did he want to show up on the day of, he didn't want to pay. And he was running down the checklist of Black Swan skills that he was using on us because he had a conversation with the person that he rode there with. Watch me use this stuff on them and get a free seat in this. His intent stunk up the entire room. And so we called him on it and ultimately walked him out of the room. But what was the problem? And Brandon told him to his face, this is what the problem is. Your problem is your intent. And so if the intent is bad, you're going to know it right off the bat. And then you got to ask yourself a question. Am I going to continue to be manipulated by this guy? Am I going to cut ties right now? Because if he's, before the relationship has been established, if he's using Black Swan methods and he's trying to manipulate me, how much pain am I asking for if I jump into a partnership with this person? And my opinion, cut him loose and let's not deal with the half. Let's go find an elf.
Amen to that.
And just for the audience tuning in, Marcella, Derek, could you give a list of upcoming courses that you be teaching?
Yeah, so I would suggest we've got the Applying Tactical Empathy with Success, which is a foundational course. It's something that you want to jump into after you've been exposed to Caviar, the N9, et cetera. There's advanced tools for tactical empathy coming up in the fall. We've got recurring real estate coaching that Marcella and I do on a monthly basis that you can also jump into as well, where it's real estate specific. It's very little content and it's more back and forth group coaching. Here's what I'm faced with. Here's what I'd like your opinion on. So take advantage of any and all of those. Chris mentioned the free resources that we have. The website has got it's got a pretty decent library when it comes to blog posts. And there's a lot in there written as it relates to real estate. So please make yourself available to all of that because we want to make you that 1 degree better. We want to get you from stagnant water to boiling.
And we have a phenomenal, for all the ladies in the room, a phenomenal women's power hour. That's just, it's an amazing group of ladies every month. So check that out too.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.